we are on the precipice of a third world war that could very easily careen into a nuclear exchange with countries coming from outside the region getting involved. And at that point, it's very hard to predict where things are going to end. You have multiple fronts around the world. They may converge, as they have done in history, to create under a banner of a world war. This has happened in human history more than once. I believe there's a risk of that happening right now. I think people underestimated the danger of, just the deployment of even tactical nuclear weapons is a game changer, because it means that now there's no expectation of restraint, and chaos can move into this void. They want to infuse a country like Iran with Western banking, Western corporations, Western finance, debt, and cultural subversion, sort of degradation, depravity within society, getting women to, in the West, the democratic barometer seems to be like how naked the women can be in public. Like that's our supposed freedom.
We'll get right back to our show, but first I urge people to check that link in the description for heavensharvest.com. We are dealing with a crazy time, as of course is by design. In my opinion, we are shifting into a new order, and it's important that we get prepared for what comes next and aren't left behind with food rations, digital IDs, CBDCs, social credit scores, all that kind of stuff. Right now, we have an absolutely incredible sale over at heavensharvest.com. 25% off if you use code WAM, W-A-M. This is something that we've never been able to do before. This is for long-term storable food that's non-GMO, organic kits, heirloom seeds, water filtration and storage, books on how to get started. There's freeze-dried food. Again, this is an opportunity for you and your loved ones to be prepared for the inevitable. What comes next, my friends? So please take this seriously. Go and check this out. 25% off when you use code WAM, W-A-M. All right, now back to the video. Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and I am joined by Patrick Henningsen of the 21st Century Wire. The links are in the description below. I highly recommend people go and check that out, of course. Patrick, you just came back from Iran. You came all the way to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico for Anarchapulco 2026, which is quite the journey. Now, right now, we have this strange shift between, as we saw under the Bush years, people on the left were generally anti-war. Obama came in, then people on the left became pro-war, and the right became anti-war. Now we have this shift again where under Trump, suddenly, if he does it, it's okay to go to war with Iran. We need regime change. A country that hasn't attacked anyone in 200 years, except for in retaliation in recent days with Israel and the United States with their preemptive strikes. So I wanted to hear your thoughts, having just been there and having studied this for a while. You have made no secret about it. You have been on the right through in the past, and of course, you have voted for Trump in the past, and you are one of the most vocal critics, and now everyone's calling you a leftist. And it's very interesting because it's that left-right paradigm it's just in a circle always. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with Iran and what brought you to the point you are at now where you're rejecting this narrative that Iran is a boogeyman that's going to kill us, much like Iraq?
Yeah, thanks a lot, and it's great to be with you. Yeah, I wasn't planning to go to Iran, but the opportunity came up at the last minute, and it created a lot of problems because I had already booked my travel here. So it was kind of really last minute, so I had to basically reroute everything. I didn't know until the last minute because I didn't have my visa until and that's how it goes with that country, especially, is everything's at the last minute. So I was all prepared, and the U.S. might even attack Iran 2 weeks ago. They already had naval assets positioned around the country, so that was, there could be a war at any moment, basically. So I was prepared to basically cancel all of that. So you have to go through all the motions to the embassy. You got to get my press accreditation. I have to put my press credentials through. It needs to be approved by their Ministry of Information. And like any country you go to, if you go to China or something, it's the same. So anyway, they got the green light. And so I was like, okay, and I got to get here by whenever it was. I don't think it was the before 16th, 15th or 16th. So it was very tight. It was a difficult journey. There's a lot of obstacles in the way. The U.S. State Department sent out a communique just before I left saying, don't go. And if you're there, leave now. And if you are there, you shelter in place because there's going to be mayhem. Kind of threatening, I would say. And this is the most, vociferous State Department warning I've ever seen. And that's important because that shows you that the government in Washington is behaving differently than in the past. Because the State Department never issued warnings like that. There's always a process where there'll be some kind of a build-up trying to get consensus for humanitarian intervention. I mean, there's a whole process that one would go through, even some fake intelligence, do the UN Security Council thing, Colin Powell with the anthrax, all of that. So none of this has happened. So this is totally unprecedented. And and so I said, when I saw that warning from the State Department, I said, actually, I need to go now. I need to go now because the war could break out. It might be my last opportunity. I approach all of these situations as a once in a lifetime. Even if there's a chance to go back, you never know if you can and if you ever will. Like I've never been back to Syria, although I was there during the war. But I took the opportunity when it arose. Did the same here. I wanted to verify. I already had my suspicions, of course, that the whole peaceful protesters being massacred was a complete psyop. Why? Because I have seen and studied color revolutions for about 15 years, and I've seen pretty much everything from Yugoslavia to the Arab Spring to the Maidan in Ukraine to Thailand to thwarted elections in various countries, including European and NATO countries. So I was like, okay, but I still need to verify it because it's one thing to have that opinion as a talking head or a pundit in the West. It's another thing to be able to back it up with some sort of more close-up observations. And so I had an opportunity to do that. Of course, the Iranians know my positions because my views are public. So they know that I'm pro-sovereignty. They know I'm pro-international law. And they know I'm pro-constitution in the U.S. So I actually am one of these dinosaurs that believes in the U.S. Constitution, that's a very robust, dynamic, flexible document, that it's the glue that holds the republic together. And if we just, as the founders laid out, follow these system of checks and balances, we will have a very strong and long life for our republic. I'm very old-fashioned in that sense. I know that's very not like in vogue these days, especially with MAGA. And all that.
Despite all the former Ron Paul supporters that are now supporting Trump and have forgotten what the Constitution is, and that was their main ideology when it was Ron Paul running. But now with Donald Trump, they've thrown it all to the side. It's quite sad to see.
They've been corrupted a little bit. Yeah, not too many Ron Paul supporters, but enough to be a little bit uncomfortable. But anyway, so I arrived there, got through customs, and immediately they took us to the National Day, which is happening. So it started. They get up early for their protests, by the way. They're on site at 7 a.m. And so they got to pray and they got to do all this stuff. So
you mean they're not like Americans? They're not nursing a hangover and showing up at 5 p.m.
No. They're up and they're out in droves. There was 2.5 million people on the streets of Tehran. 2.5 million. Now they've been telling us for the last month and 2 months that the people, the regime's ready to collapse. It's very unpopular. The mullahs are ruling with an iron fist. Okay, first of all, and this is another good insight that I got, and I think everybody should have this insight, or at least understanding of it, which is that in a country like Iran, in Asia, and in the Arab world to a large degree, but Iran's very unique. It's a republic. There's not many of those in the Middle East. No, you've got Gulf monarchies, you've got an apartheid colonial settler state, you've got some concentration camps, and then you've got Syria, which is run by Al-Qaeda, backed by the U.S. and Britain, of course.
Yeah, the HTS, formerly al-Nusra front, al-Jilani, now al-Shura, who has actual photos of him carrying beheaded heads and has been on the terrorist watch list for decades now. Now he's meeting and trying on cologne in the Oval Office.
That's right. I call Trump Abu Donald. Abu Donald, because Abu Donald saved Jilani more than once, saved him in Idlib and a few times. So anyway, we don't want to digress. But the point is that a country like Iran has a supreme leader, plays the sort of symbolic religious role that, like, say, the Russian Patriarch Kirill would do in the Eastern Orthodox Church, or, for instance, like the Pope might have done during the Holy Roman Empire, but with a full democratic, parliamentarian, republican government system. So we have checks and balances in America, where we have executive branch, we have Congress, a bicameral chamber, Senate and Congress, and we have a judiciary, and those are the three main branches of government. There's other unofficial branches of government, but those are the main ones. And that's an effective system of checks and balances. The Iranian system is like that, with about 3 or 4 other chambers, and it's very complex. So to get consensus in Iran for anything, legislation, policy, it's a very complex process of getting, but they rule with the consent of the people, 110%. The government fears the people in Iran, not the other way around.
Well, I wanted to actually throw something in there that, of course, people talk about how great the Shah was despite the Savak secret police and all the things that were involved in that. Was he critical of Israel publicly? Yes. Is his son critical of Israel publicly? Absolutely not. But of course, they found they found Israeli bullets in the bodies of children at the protests. Mike Pompeo, former CIA director, openly boasted on X that Mossad was within the crowd manipulating it. I cannot imagine a bunch of Iranians burning down a bunch of mosques. The cultural minister of Israel had openly said that they were there manipulating the protests. We have Israeli media saying that. Eventually, you got to get to a point where you say, these protests aren't legit, and how many people actually died? And that is something that you're not allowed to say. It's like questioning any major event where if people died, they don't want you asking those questions, and you could get sued, you could get, I guess, canceled to some degree, asking, did 30,000 or 40,000 people die in these protests in a few weeks, and who was really behind that?
Yeah, and all the claims of the massacres, and the numbers just went up by the hour. It's just ridiculous. And after 24, it started at 5,000, then a few hours later it was 10, then it was 20, then it was 30, then they sort of settled on 30 for a while, then it was 50. Some people started floating 70,000, and then they said it was a genocide the following day. I mean, you can kind of see where this is going. It's ridiculous. The most laughable one was they claimed that there was 40,000 people killed in this one town or city outside of Tehran that only has a population of 26,000. So that was, to me, one of the funny ones. It's completely fake. The Iranian government released a list of all the victims' names, 3,170 of which, and this was, I learned this because we were getting briefed by the police department there, and they showed us all of the important pieces of evidence that they had on file.
Well, wasn't over 400 of those deaths police?
So they regard, out of that 3,170, they regard approximately 2,400 as martyrs. So martyrs would be Basij. This is the local people's mobilization units that are attached to neighborhoods. They're of the people. It's like a standing militia, like we used to have in America. And then you have the police. Then you have first responders that were killed, that were targeted, firemen, EMS workers, nurses, and then civilians, innocent bystanders, and maybe Iranians, citizens that were caught for whatever reason. They might have been out for a protest and maybe not violent. There were provocateurs that were using the crowd as human shields to fire on the police to get a reaction. And I saw this in Syria, in Homs, and in Kiev and Maidan. This is a standard practice for agitation and to try to get those images for CNN, for the regime, and that manufactures consent in the West for regime change operations. And they did have a military operation plan to hit Iran. If it was unstable enough, the Iranians shut down the internet, intercepted a lot of Starlink terminals that were smuggled into the country, and that the things died down very quickly after that, and that tells you something as well. But back to the by the way, all these claims from casualties and massacres of protesters are all from Iranian human rights organizations, but based in New York based in Washington, D.C., and based in Toronto, funded by the National Endowment for Democracy. More than one is a known CIA front. One, Iran International News, is a known Israeli propaganda clearinghouse, Iran International News. And Google boosts Iran International News at the top of any searches on Iran. How do you get that kind of placement on Google? So that's the power of big tech working with government and the intelligence services, and to warp and distort the information space. But on the Shah issue, interesting, and you see the remnants of this. The Savak torture chambers and whatnot are there as a museum. It's very much in the forefront of people's minds. The Iran-Iraq War, which was when the U.S. gave chemical weapons to Saddam Hussein. Many people died on both sides, but Iran lost the equivalent number of people during that war that the Americans lost during the Second World War. So these are the things that shaped the Islamic Revolution. You see, the things that we did to those countries, the overthrow of Mossadegh. So they have this in their living memory. And the CIA used to train Savak, and then America left in 1975. And guess who they handed over the training of Savak to? The Israelis. So while the Shah might have said a few critical things about Israel, they were well embedded. And maybe that's why he became critical later.
Well, I mean, because, there was a very famous interview with the Shah in 1977. I believe it was with, I can't remember if it was Mike Wallace, that's right, where he, from 60 Minutes, talking about his critique of Israel and their control over things. But isn't it interesting psychologically to see all these things happening with the Iranian protests a year, not even half a year after the United States and Israel bombs Iran? It's similar to me as what we saw with Syria, where Mike Pompeo, well, not Mike Pompeo, Rex Tillerson initially in April of 2017 said, we are not going to go after Assad any further. We will work together. 3 days later, he attacks his people with chemical gas, which of course has been debunked, and most of us knew it at the time. But then a year later to the day, the same thing happens. We're going to work with them, and then chemical gases people again. Now they're saying there's chemical gases that Iran is using on people. It's just so convenient that this is all happening right now when there's this propaganda campaign against Iran, and Israel is losing support by the boatload every single day.
Yeah. Syria, you had the alleged chemical attack in East Ghouta in August of 2013. You had the alleged sarin attack in Khan Shahun, which is probably what you're referring to there, in early April, late March 2017. Then you had the infamous Duma chemical attack, the chlorine bomb attack. So that would have been April 2018. I was heading into Syria as that attack took place, so I was afraid that as an American fired cruise missiles right away, and I was crossing the border at that time. And so I was prepared to get turned back, but luckily I was given one of the longest visas for an American journalist, which was 5 weeks. I was given a 5-week visa in Syria, so that was allowed me to do a lot of reporting there. But suffice to say, not to digress too much, but the point you're making there is these narratives are constantly being recycled to the Western public. They work for our politicians because they're generally dumb as a box of rocks when it comes to anything outside of the U.S. Territorial waters, especially Republicans. The Republican IQ drops like an anvil once they get out of U.S. territorial waters, like geopolitically. Whereas the Democrats are more internationalist in their sort of outlook, if you will, and so you have that problem. But that's no longer the case. The Democrats and Republicans are almost so difficult to tell apart at the current regime. But back to Iran, and so. It's important also just to understand that, the Islamic Revolution in Iran, which happened in 1979 and into 1980, it was a rejection of the U.S. puppet. It was a clear see, they don't tell us enough in our education in the U.S. to understand the level of rejection of U.S. interference was so severe that they decided to overthrow the government. The whole country did simultaneously, and they're proud of this. And they view that as their demonstrating their fierce independence. So the Islamic Revolution is an artifact of the national character, which is fiercely independent, fiercely sovereign. Why is that? Well, the Persian culture and civilization does go back a few thousand years, maybe 5,000 plus years. So these are people that are very conscious of their footprint in history. Yeah. They're leaders in mathematics even today. They're leaders in engineering even today. They are one of the most advanced countries in the world in avionics. They're one of the most advanced countries in the world in nuclear physics and nuclear science. They're one of the most advanced countries in the world in terms of now military, air defense and missile tech, so and drone tech as well. All native, done basically for pennies on the dollar compared to what it cost us to produce the equivalent. But so you need to understand. People need to understand that they wanted to put Islam at the center of the political economy, as it were, because that was the value that they believed, that because faith and religion was absent from the previous U.S. imposed regime, they counted that as one of the reasons why there was a degeneration in society. Literally, literacy rates were horrendous. Outside of the wealthy areas of Tehran, even in Tehran itself during the Shah's period, there was no infrastructure outside of the select posh districts. And outside in the rural, forget it in terms of infrastructure. It was an afterthought. So, and you know, those problems were solved immediately after the revolution, but they've been under sanctions for 47 years to one degree or another, and severe sanctions, I would say, in the last 10 to 15 years, and it's debilitating. We've attacked their currency exactly as we did with the bolivar in Venezuela. Exactly.
Well, I actually want to throw in there, they went on to, the U.S. government went on television, Trump talked about this, Marco Rubio talked about this, hey, we manipulated the currency of Iran, which led to these protests, and it's like, okay, yeah.
No, he said, this is great. Iran's feeling the pain, said the U.S. Treasury Secretary. They're feeling the pain, and we've really done a good job. Yeah. So they equate success with collective punishment. No government has ever said that openly before today. And what it's done is it's taken the mask off economic warfare. And that's actually what I did my master's dissertation on when I did international relations at Plymouth University. I went back to school very late, in my late 40s, and I did my dissertation on this economic warfare, sanctions, currency manipulations, and the U.S. Dollar is a world reserve currency that is actually the what I call the new term is financial preponderance that it leads military preponderance. And most people, we're taught to memorize battles, dates, wars, generals, but the military preponderance follows the economic financial preponderance, financialized preponderance. And so that's really important to understand, because that is the main lever. You cannot defeat these countries by military means alone. Syria, the collapse of Syria could not have been achieved, although it took 15 years, of direct strangulation and repeated, military attacks and deploying hundreds of thousands of radical jihadi fighters armed by us in the West, paid for by the Gulf. It took forever, but it was the undermining of the economy and society as a result, and the military is part of society, so that collapsed, unable to pay salaries. And then when it was weak enough, they just, HTS, Jilani, as you said, the terrorist Al-Qaeda bands just marched in basically to Damascus. And even the Russians, who have a military presence in Syria, they said, we can't fight this war for you. There's limits to what Russia could do in terms of, fighting a war on another countries. The countries invited them to help, and Russia did help Syria for years from collapsing in 2015. Certainly they delayed the collapse of Syria, but that pincer of sanctions, currency attack, getting a country to empty its foreign currency reserves, first to sell its gold to get hard cash, because their cash is all of a sudden in free fall, so you need to get foreign currency, hard money, gold, maybe whatever, in order to make your balance of payments to buy fuel. And then you cut off, you occupy their oil fields. And so ISIS is occupying, and then the Kurds and the U.S. military after that. Syria then has to buy its own fuel back from ISIS for cash. That's what happened. And if they're able to get fuel at all. The Iranians tried to aid Syria, but the U.S. and the British hijacked protect piracy, basically, seizing oil tankers, which you can see they're doing now to Venezuela, trying to blockade Cuba. And so, I mean, they're doing this to Iran. 10 euros is 1.5 million real. That's a big, they have million real notes, okay? So you walk in for a meal and you need a stack of bills like this. Just to have a meal, me and you and some friends for dinner, you need a big stack like that.
Yeah. Well, and I know there's a major currency shift from the west to the east that's taking place now, especially with the growth of BRICS. And of course, Russia and China are some of the biggest allies of Iran, though Russia has recently said that they do not plan to intervene if there is a war in Iran, which is, I'm surprised to hear, honestly. I want to talk a little bit about the subversion by Israel on this front, because, of course, we heard about the 7-country plan back in the late 90s, early 2000s. General Wesley Clark talked about this, but of course Iran was last on that list. And on top of that, there's another thing. There's the Greater Israel Project that when I look at, Iran's not part of that. But I mean, it doesn't stretch out to Iran. So I want to ask, why is Iran such an important target of a country like Israel, which seems like, as they push the idea of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, they're pushing the idea of weapons of mass destruction in Iran, which the White House said last year around July June or July when they were attacking Iran. They said themselves, we have completely obliterated their nuclear arsenal. Now they're saying again it's back. So why is it that Israel is so focused on Iran of all countries? There's Tajikistan, there's Turkmenistan. Turkey has been an issue. Why Iran?
Well, the first thing you need to look at is the subversion by the U.S. and by Israel. It's also, the first level is the cultural subversion, okay, and the Borg. Okay, yeah. The Borg is very important. Iran has been able to, kind of protect itself from the Borg because they have a Republican form of government. This is another reason why the United States has a high degree of sovereignty. It's because of our system of government. But we can't see that reflected in our, quote, enemies, because that's heresy from an American point of view to view them as a sovereign country. Separate conversation there. But so, and the other thing is making the whole justification for war about women covering their hair. Utterly ridiculous. That's not an issue for the Gulf states and their monarchies, very undemocratic. Well, we can't talk about that. No, but it's an issue here. We need to free the women. They did this with Afghanistan. It was the first feminist war in history. NATO's marketing campaign for Afghanistan was let's keep the progress going and liberate the women. So that's what that was all about after 10, 15 years of occupation. Utterly ridiculous. Yeah. So the same thing here. But they want to infuse a country like Iran with Western banking, Western corporations, Western finance, debt, and cultural subversion, sort of degradation, depravity within society, getting women to, in the West, the democratic barometer seems to be like how naked the women can be in public. Like that's our supposed freedom. Where in a country like Iran, you have to respect the fact that they want to preserve the dignity of their women. They believe that that's a positive cultural attribute for longevity and sustainability of their society, communities, families, and way of life.
And besides, by the way, women...
conservative. They are conservative with the big C. That's the difference.
Well, and by the way, women for quite some time, there's a huge plethora of examples of this, especially in Tehran, where women have taken off the hijabs anyway.
Everywhere. Everywhere. I was in the largest open air market in northern Tehran. I can't pronounce it. Starts with a T, but I struggle with the Farsi words as they're totally counterintuitive to what we're used to. But I was out there, and I would say it was a very busy night. What night was that? Would have been Wednesday night, and very busy. There are markets that are open till 3 a.m. And they're teeming with people. It's a very vibrant social life. There were in that market, I would say there's probably about 2,000 people that were mingling around. And out of that 2,000, maybe there was half the women, so 1,000 women. Out of that 1,000 women, half were uncovered. Half. Yeah. So you come on. There is zero restriction for women to take cover or not, doesn't matter. It's a total lie. This is a big psyop used to manufacture consent to demonize that country.
That's exactly what I saw in countries like Bosnia, which is both Christian and Muslim, and I saw about 50% of women had hijabs on. So what's the difference? Why not bomb Bosnia? I mean, they've done that already 20 years ago, about 25 years ago, but why not bomb Bosnia then? They have some women there that decide that they want to wear hijabs and they have a tight family life.
Yeah, let's free the women. It's just stupid. It's a ridiculous line of argument, and I'm frankly, people need to sort of reject this out of hand. And so back to the question you asked: why is Iran such a critical target for Israel? When we say that, we should just underline this by the fact that this is a two-pronged issue. Okay, and gets to the core of the geopolitical riddle that a lot of people debate and try to determine: is Israel the tail wagging the dog, i.e. directing the U.S., manipulating the U.S., the smaller power controlling the bigger power of the U.S., or is Israel a beachhead for Western imperialism and for control of Eurasia? And the answer is Israel began as a beachhead for Anglo-American to project power and control, an extension of an unofficial extension of empire after the British Empire was folding in on itself because it had to, because it was no longer sustainable, and the United States took over as the preeminent maritime power in the world to police commerce and trade through the waterways, the canals, the choke points for the global economy, and the maritime law, the legal framework, the insurance industry. All that's what undergirds our global economy. Okay, and so Israel is important because it provided that sort of unsinkable aircraft carrier for the Anglo-American interests. Yeah. So they're very important. So, but what's happened is over the last 50 years. The Israeli lobby and Israeli influence has gotten so deeply intertwined with the highest sort of levels of finance, media, and politics, and the amount of money going into our political system in America from the Israeli lobby and pro-Israeli sources and Zionist, Christian Zionist is part of that as well. But it's now, the tail is wagging the dog. So if you look at all the U.S. military positions in the region, Bahrain, Fifth Fleet, you've got Al Adin Air Force Base, the massive in Qatar, it used to be CENTCOM, no longer, but the occupation of northeastern Syria, positions in Iraq, some of which have been vacated, most of which have been vacated recently in anticipation of this war, plus Diego Garcia, plus Saudi Arabia, plus two bases in Israel. We have two military bases in Israel. We also have Incirlik Air Force Base in Turkey, allegedly for the nuclear deterrent during the Cold War, but there's no more, we're told there's no more Cold War. We have also a facility in Egypt, Djibouti, which is a major military hub there on the Horn of Africa, and then a few other places. So what is all that? We saw what all that was for. When Iran, during what they called Operation True Promise, when they hit Israel on the first one and the second wave, the third wave, as you mentioned, was June of 2025. But in each of those times, you saw all of those areas activated, sea, land, and air, and Jordan too. U.S. have a military base in Jordan. And that was to protect Israel. And plus the fleet parked in the Mediterranean to provide a defense shield for a strip of land the size of New Jersey.
Was that a military base in Jordan, I guess after the fact, after Israel took over Jerusalem? Because I'm trying to remember exactly the timing there. As long as the since the Arab Spring, they've built up their presence there. Jordan was where the U.S. and the British trained a lot of the terrorists that were then deployed into Syria, and then Turkey, Ghazni and Tep and those border regions. That's where terrorists accumulated, and along with NGOs that were supporting those terrorists. But our moderate rebel fighters were then deployed into Syria. So, but that Al Tanf area where Iraq, Jordan, and Syria borders meet
very key piece of real estate there. The United States needed to have control over this geopolitically, and then they hold it down for Israel in that respect. So, but Jordan's very important, for the protection of Israel. It has to be a controlled puppet state. Otherwise, it's a big problem because the airspace that Israel could use in an attack on Iran, you have to look at the route. This is why this Assad government had to be overthrown. I was talking about this back in 2012 on some big network TV at the time, even when I was not as experienced as I am now. But I said that to attack Iran, you need a clear path, and you can only have a clear path once you neutralize Hezbollah in South Lebanon, and then the Syrian Arab army had very good air defenses under Assad, enough to repel any kind of a big attack, or at least make people think twice, the Israelis or the U.S. And the other one is Iraq. Okay, so if Iraqi airspace is closed, if Jordanian airspace is closed, if Saudi Arabian airspace is closed, then to attack Iran, you have to go all the way. And if Turkey says, no, we're not going to allow you to overfly, then you've got a hell of an operation there. You have to go through Azerbaijan or Iraqi Kurdistan.
From Ukraine?
Or from Ukraine. There's not much that's available there. Romania, Greece, Cyprus is obviously a big hub for NATO, and Israel uses Cyprus. GCHQ's there, RAF Akatori. They've assisted. In fact, the genocide that Israel's done couldn't have been possible without NATO's base in RAF Akatori in Cyprus. But the other thing is Israel would then send their F-35s there during the Iranian missile attack. Even Netanyahu arguably was in Cyprus or Greece, had to flee during a certain time during those missile attacks. Okay, so but the bottom line here is all of that is to protect Israel. And so think of the cost from a U.S. military point of view of all that. We say, we give Israel $3.8 billion a year in aid. No. If you count in all the ancillary costs, I don't know what that number is per year, but it's a massive number.
Well, that's the epitome of big government, which conservatives claim to be against, and then not so much in this case. We've had over 100,000 people killed in Palestine. We've had, the biggest cost is that human life. And with an attack on Iran, there's no doubt that would escalate into a global conflict to some degree with other Arab states, because there's a lot of Arab states that say they're at the ready. There's the, what do they call it, the Arab League, with multiple major countries that have nuclear weapons.
The only nuclear-armed country in the region is Israel, but they're not allowed to be inspected by the IAEA because they said we won't allow them in. So they're wanting to bomb Iran for non-existent nukes, but Israel can have an arsenal of anywhere between 70 and 300 warheads. Right. Pakistan has nuclear weapons, but they're not Middle East and they're not Arab, but they're on the fringe. They are allied with Iran in a certain way, but they're more closely allied with Saudi Arabia, Pakistan. So it's complicated. Yeah. But back to, so it will, if the U.S. attack Iran, which could happen any moment. I don't know when this podcast is going out.
It's going out within the next 2 days, and in that time, it's very possible that it'll happen. They just did the border peace meeting, and Trump said very soon there could be strikes and regime change in another country, and I think we know which one that is.
So it could happen at any moment. So it will be a regional war because Iran's drawn a red line. They're not taking this. My understanding from reports, credible reports from analysts that I respect, have said that the White House reached out to the Iranians and asked if they could do a symbolic reciprocal exchange of targets to both declare victory. And the Iranians rejected it. And they said any attack on us, whether it's limited or whatever, is going to be met with full retaliation at all U.S. positions in the region and also Israel. Okay, so they've drawn that red line. That's why there's been this huge buildup, and that's why the U.S. hasn't already. The U.S. have more than enough assets to attack or damage Iran in the region right now. Why this overwhelming buildup that's coming to this huge crescendo? So in 7, 8 countries, 6, 7, 8 countries could very easily be pulled into this, without a doubt. And namely, we'll start with Iraq. Okay, they've already they will probably announce that their airspace will be closed. There's going to be a lot of pressure on them, physical, financial, bribery, threat to change that position. Saudi Arabia said they're not going to facilitate that. Yemen will respond to Israel and to U.S. positions. Yemen will. And maybe the Hashd al-Shabi, which is a huge People's Mobilization part of the Iraqi Ministry of Defense that was founded when ISIS appeared, they're active, and they're led by the Ayatollah al-Sistani, which is not the supreme leader in Iraq, but very influential in terms of driving sort of the populist mood, especially in the Islamic side of things. And then you have some other potential actors that could get involved, as well as Hezbollah could get involved. They've been very quiet, but they still have some capabilities to distract or hit Israel at the same time.
Well, and a lot of these groups have been armed and funded by the West in the first place, too, to some degree. They've magically found weapons sitting on the ground in places. I remember when I was in Syria years ago, talking to locals, and they would just say, yeah, this group of people from Turkey, the United States, Britain, and Israel would show up, trucks, they would build a little building outside on the outskirts of town. A bunch of people in balaclavas would get out, they'd go into the place, they'd load boxes into the place. About a week later, these people would come out, blow a place up. Next thing you know, the Israeli government would fly planes over, dropping pieces of paper saying, get out within the next 10 minutes, we'll bomb. They'd look at these pieces of paper, same thing that we saw in Libya, by the way. They'd look at these pieces of paper, they'd leave, they'd bomb this shack that they just put up and magically just happen to hit a school or a hospital at the same time. And, that is something I heard from so many people in that region. So to me, even like hearing Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Taliban, Mujahideen, Muslim Brotherhood, all these groups, even to a great degree, Hamas, which got arms and funds from Israel for years. To me, it just seems to me like it's what they call a false flag to some degree. If the Israeli government wanted a reason, they would find a reason, as we're seeing with these protests. So when I hear about like a lot of these groups that could strike Israel, I think how many of them, because Israel doesn't really care about their own people that much. It's clear they were hiding their missiles in the middle of downtown Tel Aviv. So I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, first of all, they've never expected anyone would have the temerity to attack them. And so this is one of the reasons for the outrage of October 7th, and also with Iran hitting them and Hezbollah hitting Israel in defense. Hezbollah is 100% independent. That is the South Lebanese militia. But it's been packaged and labeled as a, quote, terrorist organization by U.S. media, the U.S. political designation, and their allies have followed suit. And Israel has just promoted this idea that Hezbollah is running around in Venezuela, which is absolute BS.
Oh, by the way, I talked to someone who was from Margarita Island in Venezuela a few weeks ago. Have you ever seen a Muslim in your life on that island? No, I grew up on that island. My father is a politician on that island. I know that island. There's never been a Muslim ever in sight there.
And by the way, Shia Muslims are much more chilled out than with Sufi background and than a radical Sunni Wahhabi. So I wouldn't even put them in the same category. In fact, Hezbollah exists because of the Israeli occupation of South Lebanon. That it was a self-defense mechanism. The U.S. controls the Lebanese army. They won't allow them to have air defenses. They don't have control of their airspace. So Hezbollah is the only one that fights for Lebanon to defend their borders. Imagine if you had a similar situation in Arizona or Texas, that would be the de facto defense force. And so this is why they're demonized and labeled as terrorists. They have had half the seats in parliament in Lebanon, and they're very well respected and liked in the regions they govern, because when you're in Lebanon, you drive through, it's a disaster. Yeah. The potholes, the garbage. When you drive into Hezbollah-controlled territory, the roads are perfect. Everything's clean. There's no litter. The electric things are perfect, and everything. The streets are tidy. I mean, the schools are beautiful. So they reinvest into their community. And
you mean like the red zones, like Baalbek, where they say don't go?
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah. Those are the best places to visit in Lebanon, and the people are wonderful. So, but with Hamas, Hamas has also developed its own weapons. It's mostly small arms. Mm-hmm. They get what they can smuggled in, but we can't take and that is basically an armed liberation struggle, which in any other country it would be deemed as such, but because it's in Israeli occupied territory, it's a terrorist group. So I mean, if they would regard American revolutionaries in 77-6 as terrorists if Israel in the U.S., present U.S. iteration was around, labeled them terrorists and give them no agency whatsoever. So, but anyway, so we have to separate those. Muslim Brotherhood absolutely controlled by U.S., British, and Israeli intelligence. Traditionally, that movement has been taken over and used as a cudgel between Arab states and destabilization. Certainly in Syria, that was the case. And Al-Qaeda and all these groups, I think we can just accept these are U.S. and Israeli run, paid for by the Gulf. But the Gulf has they're now having second thoughts about their partnership with the West in all of these divisive strategies. And you're starting to see more pan-Arab thinking, even though you don't have Arab nationalist countries. But the Greater Israel Project, which you mentioned before, is important, okay? And I wrote a really good piece on this for New Dawn magazine in Australia. It's a great magazine. And one of the last independent print publications that I recommend, not just in geopolitics, but in sort of esoteric issues as well. But the Greater Israel Project, when I went to study it, it was interesting. Israel would be a city-state with subservient client protectorates around it. So the Greater Israel Project, from the river to the sea, from the Mediterranean to the Euphrates, and the Sinai Peninsula as well, the Nile, all controlled by Israel, demilitarized governments all around it, totally taking orders and subservient. And now you can see Israel is threatened, and they have no compunction with killing an unlimited amount of civilians if necessary. No one will restrain them. They have, that term Pax Judaica is a very real phenomenon right now. That is essentially the Yinon plan from Ode Yinon, the Israeli Defense Ministry strategist, penned this in 1983, and that is the basis of the Greater Israel Project. That's always been an ambition of the State of Israel, but it requires completely defanged and subservient Arab states surrounding it, and that is the Greater Israel Project. Now, they couldn't go so far as Iran, because that's Central Asia technically, and those are not Arab, predominantly Arab tribes and Arab countries. It's different. Iran's a complete mix of like 8 different ethnicities, and there is no like pure Persian anymore.
Yeah, many forget the fact that there's a lot of Jewish people that are from there as well. I know many myself.
Some still there. Yeah, they have a Jewish member of parliament that's a protected seat in Iran. So but the Greater Israel Project is about dominion, and so it's a post-colonial. So now the U.S. receding out of the region, Israel taking over as a superpower in the Mediterranean, and then all finance and mediation goes through Israel. And in terms of, so the British Empire is weakened. Listen, Israel would be very happy to see the U.S. and Russia go at it. Mm-hmm. They would be very happy, because then they would rise as a nuclear power. Mm-hmm. And the nuclear blackmail issue is not a theoretical thing. Yeah. That's the problem, I think, with all of this is, and I put out, when this crisis was boiling last year, I put out my solution on X, which was that the new JCPOA, which was perfectly fine for restraining Iran's nuclear ambitions, but Trump tore it up in the first year of his presidency at the behest of Netanyahu's office via Mike Pompeo. Yeah. But if there's a new Iran nuclear agreement, Iran should only sign it if Israel is open to IAEA nuclear inspections and they disarm. There should be a nuclear-free Middle East. That would be a good, I think, solution that everybody could respect, and then you could have a security architecture that works for the region. But that's not going to happen, and we know that's not going to happen. And this is very frightening, because we are on the precipice of a third world war that could very easily careen into a nuclear exchange with countries coming from outside the region getting involved. And at that point, it's very hard to predict where things are going to end. You have multiple fronts around the world. They may converge, as they have done in history, to create under a banner of a world war. This has happened in human history. more than once. I believe there's a risk of that happening right now. I think people have underestimated the danger of just the deployment of even tactical nuclear weapons is a game changer, because it means that now there's no expectation of restraint, and chaos can move into this void without international frameworks, which existed during the Cold War, that created a kind of bipolar stability in the international system. And that's where all these bipolar realists like John Mearsheimer and all of these people who are very prominent now in the punditry space for a good reason, because they understand power politics. But they're children of the Cold War. And so we don't have that. We're moving into a multipolar world with multiple centers of power, which is also inherently more dangerous in a way, because the rival powers will now compete for resources, territory, as we can see. And I'm going to have to put the United States in that category, because making these offhanded threats of annexing Canada and Greenland and the Panama and Cuba. So where are we now with the post-Westphalian nation state? Where are we? We're going into unprecedented territory. This is virgin territory for us in terms of being able to process this. Do we have are our political structures robust enough? Our institutions, our politicians, our leaders, are they capable? Do they have the statecraft, skill set to pull off what is now requiring a high-wire act? Look at the Ukraine-Russia negotiations. They've done nothing in a year, because Trump's deployed his son-in-law and some shyster from Atlantic City or Long Island, Steve Witkoff. They don't have any official position in the U.S. government. So what do the Russians do? They said, well, we're not going to send our foreign minister either. We'll send a guy like yours, Dmitry Kirillov, or Kirill Dmitriev. Yeah, I can't remember his name, but, from Miami. And so the Russians are kind of, in a way, that's kind of like laughing at the U.S. and saying, fine, you want to play that game? Let's play that game, and we'll get on and do our business on the ground in Ukraine. That's not going to get us the type of solutions diplomatically or agreements or treaties that can last. So the U.S. is now agreement incapable under this president. It was under Biden. But under this president, Trump, it's even worse. So this is not good definitely for the United States, it's bad. It's bad economically, it's bad for the economic future of America, it's bad for the political future of America and for the world. It's extremely dangerous if a country as powerful as the United States of America does not have control over its own foreign policy, and it doesn't. It's being controlled and manipulated by a foreign entity, and that's a long process in the making, and we're here now, and we're now faced with this potential situation where, it could go very badly. I can't see the positive end of this, and I don't want to say I'm not rooting for the defeat of the United States, but let's just say if the U.S. was mortally wounded in all of this, I'm just going to stand back and say, I'm not surprised. I tried to warn you that this could happen, because this is not 1980. This is not 1945. You have countries in the world like China and Asia that are bona fide mid-tier or top-tier superpowers with nuclear weapons and a great conventional military and satellites the same ones we have. So, you can't run your geopolitics on software, Windows 97, which is what I think a lot of Washington and London and in Brussels are doing.
Well, and I want to close it off right away, but we have obviously the whataboutisms. Well, Trump, if it wasn't Trump, it would be Kamala. Yeah, she's a psycho, crazy, drunk person who obviously would probably end up in a similar situation. However, it's not that, it's this, and the reality is, does this feel like winning to you? To me, it does not. We have a bunch of politicians that are clearly on video doing terrible things with Epstein that Israel clearly has. Again, pushing in the little chair for Netanyahu, as Trump does. We have Iranians burning giant effigies of Baal, and Israel's insulted by that and saying it's anti-Semitic. So that should tell you everything you need to know, really. But this has been such a fascinating conversation, Patrick, and I really appreciate it. I have to ask, though, what does the individual do? What does a person watching do? Because, we could say protest or do all this stuff, vote different, but none of that actually seems to have any effect whatsoever, as we've seen since ancient Greece. So the question is, what does an individual really do in this situation other than just get prepared personally?
Yeah, get prepared personally. People need to take care of their own affairs, of course, but in this digital age, unfortunately, we are in the midst of the cognitive warfare, and this is the military and the intelligence and U.S. firms and Palantir, all of these people, they and NATO, they regard what's between our ears as a battle space. They call it the cognitive space. So they're adopting what's called the whole society approach, and that means that there is no war or peacetime. It's a continuous spectrum. That's the way they are in their documents, in their speeches, in their conferences. Now, how many of us are dialed into that type of thinking? I'm not. I'm kind of old-fashioned. There's a war and then there's peace. We want to avoid war. Our leadership, unfortunately, is not there. So what we need to do is ask ourselves the question, would you rather know what's going on for real, or would you be happy just to kind of be lied to and sort of, chew on that intellectual bubble gum that you're being fed by politicians and the media? Which world do you want to live in? Do you want to see clear-eyed, or you can certainly check out? I mean, that's an option. But, this could follow you wherever you are. I believe in the principles. Let's get past parties. Let's get past MAGA, Republican, Democrat. Let's stick to principles. Principles, meaning that I will defend the woke Palestinian student protesters' First Amendment, and their second, their third, their fourth, and their fifth. I will defend them. And in Minnesota, I will defend their state's 10th Amendment rights to not have masked federal paramilitaries coming by the thousands into their city.
You mean you don't like problem, reaction, solution, repeat for eternity? We shouldn't have a police state after they create a problem and then come in as a so-called solution?
Yeah, exactly. And then profit off that and build out this control grid. Back to basics. The U.S. has due process. It has a good system. It has a good constitution. It has a written Bill of Rights. That is such a blessing in the world. So, it's only good if it's applied. And so, if you're enamored and enthralled with your party and your red hat, and you're willing to sacrifice those principles for your political tribal interests or affiliations or finances, then you're going to undermine the very basis of that society that allowed you to get there in the first place. And I think from that point of view, this is one of the dangers of late-stage empire. Late-stage empire in the U.S., lack of imagination. To see where's America's place in the world in the future? Is it just to destroy, to disrupt, to sabotage the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative? We're not building any infrastructure. China is. We're just blowing shit up in Nord Stream pipeline and so forth. So that's what type of compelling future does America want? Do Americans want? I'm sure it's different from what is going in the heads of the people in Washington right now. I can tell you right now, it is not in America's interest because they don't vote that way. Right. They always vote anti-war every election, but then something happens after that swearing-in ceremony. And the last one, if you notice, the current president did not put his hand on the Bible, which I found that really kind of strange and disturbing at the same time.
I'm surprised they didn't just bring out a Talmud at this point, honestly.
I was shocked, and I thought, why can't people pull him up on this? So, where are the Democrats on? Where's the opposition? There is no opposition. The American eagle needs two wings to fly. You need a viable opposition. This is healthy. And when we come and we make compromises and we try to get the best for America, we have a president that will lead the Americans, not rule over the Americans. So I still hold out hope for these old-fashioned principles, because what else do you have at the end of the day? Yeah. That is all you've got. And so that, and also it's going to be good for us to view other people in the world, whatever their faith is, whatever their ethnicity is, as humans first, as our our brethren in the human race, and not as the other, not dehumanize them, we're going to get a lot farther, I think, in history and in our children's children. We're going to do better as a species if we adopt that outlook first, and then you can add all the little labels after that. But yeah.
Well, absolutely. I mean, one of the number one, like the modus operandi of the state is usually to bankrupt people of their humanity, because they say it's a war on this culture, this religion, this country. I always say it's the war on you as an individual, the war on the human spirit. And of course, they're winning in a lot of ways, but I think it's important that people find it in their heart to find perspective. I've been to 44 countries, and I grew up not knowing about most of the places I was going to. And, the perspective I got on the ground was incredible and changed my view of a lot of this. I've always been anti-war, but to actually go to those places is just incredibly eye-opening. You think about, the mass migration. I mean, Israel openly brags about sending migrants to the West. They're causing the wars. What do you think is causing it? And then your country gives them welfare. Hey, maybe we should look at the real problems that lead to this in the first place. Look at Iran post 1953. Look at Afghanistan back in the 1970s, and see the difference. And maybe we'll see what, I wouldn't say I don't like to use the word we, but your government has been involved in over all these years. Patrick, it's been fascinating to talk to you, and I'd like to make sure that other people get more of your insights on these things. So where can people find all of your work and support the work you do?
Sure, and hopefully if it's on video sharing, you get links below. But 21stcenturywire.com is our main platform, and then I also have a Substack, which is patrickhenningsen.substack.com. That's more personal writing, more in-depth selected stuff. And then you can also see me. I'm a co-anchor on the largest, most long-running UK alternative media outlet called the UK Column. Mm-hmm. So I do the Friday news there live normally. I'm not in studio this week, obviously, because I'm here. But those are my main venues. Instagram, I put out a lot of shorts, like my reports from Iran. You can see the little snippets on Telegram, Instagram, YouTube Shorts as well. So we try to get content out, Rumble, to all these different platforms. But 21st Century Wire is the sort of main one. That's the mothership, if you will. We've been running since 2009. So, yeah.
Well, absolutely excellent. And I also urge people to follow you on X, no matter how shadow banned you may be. Again, Patrick Henningsen, amazing person, 21st Century Wire, UK Column. It's all linked in the description, the Substack as well. And I hope people stay tuned for more at Anarchapulco 2026. As always, my friends, we are incredibly restricted by the algorithm, so hit that like button, share on social media, hit the notification bell, and hit subscribe if you have not yet already. Until next time, stay tuned for more. Make sure to check those links below, my friends. We are on Telegram, Band.video, BitChute, Odyssey, Rumble, and Brighteon at World Alternative Media. We're on Hive, Steemit, and Vigilante.tv at Josh Sigurdson, and on the Bad Guys TikTok and Instagram, World Alternative Media, Twitter and Getter at World Alt Media, and all the major podcast platforms except for Spotify, where, of course, we are banned. Hit that like button, share on social media, hit the notification bell, and hit subscribe if you have not yet already. Make sure to check out our solutions to the problems that we face around the world in the description of this video. And as always, my friends, live freely, live by example. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Social media, hit the notification bell, and hit subscribe if you have not yet already. Until next time, stay tuned for more.